Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks everybody for joining me for this panel on the future of food. So, hopefully, we'll be providing you with some great food for thought as we head towards lunch. And I'm delighted to be joined on this panel by so many distinguished innovators and thought leaders in the area of food tech. So, as introduced, I'm Xin Yi Lim, the Executive Director of Sustainability and Agricultural Impact at Pinduoduo. We are China's largest online agricultural platform, connecting over 800 million consumers to 16 million farmers, and we're actively investing across the agri-food value chain. And here on this panel, we've got two very exciting startups, Float Foods and Green Rebel, as well as Sonalie Figueiras, the Green Queen. And I'll hand it over to them to introduce themselves, who they are, what their company does, and how it plays into what they see as the future of food. So starting first with Helga, take it away.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so my name is Helga. I'm co-founder of Green Rebel. So Green Rebel is an Indonesian-grown food tech startup that develops whole-cut plant-based beef and chicken with regional flavors. Our products are designed to be optimized for Asian cooking, so it withstands heat for hot pot, and the products are able to absorb very deep flavors, which I think is key for Asian culinary. And yeah, I think Asians love their traditional food. There is strong affinity for Asian food everywhere in around the globe, and I think that's how Green Rebel fits into the whole alternative protein industry. And hopefully, we can spice things up.
Thanks. Vin?
Hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be on this show. It's absolutely fantastic opportunity. Thank you. I'm Vin. I'm the founder of Float Foods. We are dedicated to transforming the way we eat, and we want to start by actually working on functional plant proteins to be able to deliver a whole egg substitute that consists of the egg white and the egg yolk.
Great. And Sonali?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's super exciting to be part of She Loves Tech. I'm Sonalie Figueiras. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Green Queen Media. We're Asia's largest sustainability magazine. We're also the voice of the alt protein industry across the region, and we're one of a handful of outlets leading the food tech conversation globally.
Sure. So if I could stay with Sonali, you recently published your APAC Alternative Protein Industry Report a few months ago. Do you mind sharing with the audience what some of the key takeaways from that report are? For instance, where you see most of the funding going towards and, any interesting key trends.
Absolutely. So it was quite a behemoth report. We just went live with it in September. It's around 244 pages. And I think one of the key things to really underline is how different that report is from our first inaugural report in January 2020. So in just 18 months, we went from a landscape with just over 20 startups, and the biggest funding round at the time was Shiok Meat's seed at $4 million US, to this year where we had over 150 startups and counting. A whole bunch have actually come out of stealth since we went live with the report. And the biggest round on our in the report was Green Monday's record-breaking 70 million. So the ecosystem in Asia has just completely changed beyond recognition. And so out of that, I think the key trends to take away are that, one, the money is really flowing into food tech as an investment category, where 2 years ago that was not the case. Most family offices and funds were not looking at alternative protein and food startups as a must-have bucket in their investment portfolio. So I would say that's a huge trend, right? Because the money coming in is a huge instigator for startups to be able to grow and continue. Another big trend that I think is somewhat similar to Europe and USA, but on a much bigger scale, is that in Asia, big food conglomerates and companies and CPGs are just jumping in. They're all coming out with their own products, their own lines, some better than others, but they have iterated very quickly. as soon as they saw the trend. We see this in Korea, we see this in Japan, we see this in China. It's just, we see this in India. They've thought, okay, we need to have some of our products on the shelves, which is sort of good news for the industry, but definitely more competition for the startups. And then the last big trend is really around localization. And it's in two ways. I would say one is localization of flavor. So for example, in Thailand, you have companies that are making, plant-based patties that are meant for Thai kind of fish cake type situations with kaffir lime leaf right inside, right? So that wouldn't be applicable to a US or an European audience. But the thing is, in Europe and the US, it's really been around dairy and around burgers and around sausages, and things like chicken nuggets, none of which are regularly eaten in Asia. And of course, one of our biggest success stories is Green Monday's Omni Pork, which originally was created, to be able to be used in dumplings and spring rolls and all kinds of things like that. And they've obviously expanded their range. So that's the second part of the localization trend, which is applications. I think I won't offend too many people when I say that Asian cuisines tend to require a much wider range of protein and meat application styles. And so you need more different products. You can't just have one product that fulfills everyone's cooking needs, every chef, every home cook. And so that is a continued trend that we see. So much more niche companies launching and going, well, I'm going to focus just on this, and I'm going to give home chefs this, and I'm going to give restaurant chefs this other thing. And so I see that really continuing, and I see Asia being very much part of the innovation. And then the other thing in Asia is obviously Asian consumers are much more motivated by safety and health, where in the US and the EU, we see the environmental halo is very strong as a motivator to purchase these products. Here, it really goes back, especially in places like mainland China. This is a country that has had a history of food scandals, and safety is of prime importance. And so we see the trend towards startups really focusing on that line of conversation more than just, hey, when you eat this, you're saving the planet, which tends not to be as, passionately received as it is in other markets. I mean, there's more to unpack, but I'll let the other panelists jump in.
Thanks, Sonalie. I think you've done a wonderful job of just setting the scene. And I think as you were talking about, the localization and, this designing products that are more suited to Asian flavors, I saw Helga and Vin nodding very vigorously. So maybe if I go over to Helga next, because I think, one of the trends that was also in that APAC Alternative Protein report was about how these homegrown Asian companies that are emerging will soon overtake their Western counterparts in Asia, right? So there's a part of it that's what Sonali's been talking about, which is really understanding local cuisine and what local consumers care about. And I know Green Rebel has done a fantastic job in terms of working with local players as well as international players. We've got IKEA, we've got Starbucks, etc. So Helga, could you share with us your take on this and your plans for Green Rebel to go from Indonesia to Asia and to the world? And what sort of food trends do you think from Asia would take off in the West?
Yes, thank you. I think Sonalie has, laid out the facts very well. And in fact, I think the thesis that she shared is the thesis that I believe in. And that's why we have a wide range of products from beef alternatives, chicken alternatives, and now cheese, vegan cheese, because we see that Asian culinary is so diverse. One restaurant would like to play with different types of meats. And would like to have different applications, and so one product will then solve what they are looking for. So I second what Sonalie has said. I think given that there is a huge affinity for Asian flavors everywhere, I think right now mostly driven by Thai, Korean, Japanese, and soon actually Indonesian flavors as well. I think products with regional flavors or products that are designed to be able to be cooked well using those culinary arts are going to win the market. I mean, when I say win, the market for animal protein is so large everywhere. And so I think there is a room for many players to play in one market. And so, yeah, I think there is a room for different products with different uniqueness in every parts of the world. And when it comes to Green Rebel plants going abroad, so right now, I mean, it's been a year and we have been very focused on Indonesia. Next year, early next year, we're going to launch into Singapore, Malaysia, and Philippines, and hopefully soon to Western countries in Asia Pacific. And the following year, we're hoping that we can enter the US.
That's great. And I think another major, theme, and it'd be remiss for any panel these days not to touch upon, is around COVID. So I'm curious to hear from Vin, how has COVID impacted the demand or interest for plant-based alternatives? I mean, I was very curious to find out more about why you chose to launch your startup, Float Foods, in June last year, right, in the middle of a pandemic. So if you have any tips or sort of advice for people, especially since you've launched a startup in the middle of the pandemic, we'd be very curious to hear about that.
Thank you. So, yeah, it was really odd because I think it started with this kind of all of us being shaken to the core, right? Because we were all blindsided, came out of nowhere. We all were like initially, oh, it's going to stick around for 6 months, but then it didn't. So I think it really forced us to completely rethink what we were doing, how we were doing, and that included how we were eating as well. So I think for me, being a Singaporean, I'm born in Singapore, it hit us hard because we are completely dependent on, imports for everything, for milk and eggs and breads and everything. So it occurred to me that why couldn't we find a way to try to develop, create, and manufacture locally to be able to meet not all of our requirements, but at least some of it. And that was really the impetus for me to start with the eggs. So that was challenging during COVID because obviously we were all in lockdown. But I think, I come from a biotech startup, which was significantly harder for me because, we were doing whole genome sequencing and things like that. And based on the learning that I got running that biotech startup, where I could leverage government infrastructure, research institutions, very quickly engage PhD scientists, look at the academic institutions, manage to leverage all of them very quickly to try to help us to accelerate much faster, even during the COVID situation. So really, I think it's always good to try and start something on your own, but very early on, if you can leverage all the other infrastructure support that's available to you, you can really fly. And I think that's really what happened to us, because in a very short space, by the end of last year, we were already getting funding grants from Temasek Foundation. And then by early this year, we managed to get our seed investment. So the speed at which we moved, I think, was a lot in part due to all these different facets that came together to support that push.
And I guess for the idea of coming up with a plant-based egg, how much of that was, kind of the earlier themes that Sonalie mentioned, like people caring a little bit more about the food safety and the quality aspects, or how much of it was perhaps more on the food security side of things, since you mentioned that Singapore does rely very heavily on imported products, even though the country has set a 30 by 30 goal?
Yeah. To be honest, the original idea was, hey, we need to be independent. So, we want to be in Singapore, we want to be independent by we want to get at least 30% of our resources locally in terms of food production by 2030. So if we are importing currently or eating currently 2 billion eggs every year, and we import 74%, so right now 3 out of 4 eggs are coming from outside. I think if we want to hit our 30 by 30, we need to then be able to have at least 1 in 3 eggs being done locally here. We have egg farms already, and they are supporting the market, but I don't see why we couldn't actually rethink and reimagine the way we are producing eggs, where we could have both. We could have the animal version and the plant version, and then it could complement each other, and together that could give a big push to support the Singapore economy. And I think later on, as we dug deeper into this whole scenario of the eggs for security, we started looking at the nutritional profile, and we said, hey, it has to match the protein content of eggs. It has to taste, it has to look, it has to, it has to appeal to all the sensory, checklist that people have, because as all of us know, eggs are very, very territorial. Everybody has their love affair with their eggs. I think my husband has his own love affair, and my friends have their own love affair. So it's going to be quite challenging, I think, for us to very closely try, slowly try to get them to move their thinking across to this plant-based egg. But I can see that it's already happening, and I think people are already more amenable. They're a little bit more open to the idea of actually trying plant-based eggs.
Great. And I think the nutrition aspect is definitely something that we want to come back to later. But I think another point to also highlight is also on the pricing side of things, right? Because if we want consumers to go beyond just, trying their first plant-based patty at a fast food chain or, buying it regularly, the pricing has to be a major driver. And I think particularly, sitting in Southeast Asia, in developing markets, this would be a particular concern as well. So I'm curious to hear from Helga and Vin, where your products are today with regards to price parity and how you plan to, further lower the prices going forward.
Yeah, sure. I can start. So for Green Rebel beef, our products are on par with grass-fed beef, and our chicken price is about on par or 20% higher of the free range compared to free range chicken in the country. And our goal is to continually reduce the price to reach price parity with conventional chicken and beef in the next 5 years.
Yes, I think from our perspective, because we have done R&D, the cost at the moment is a little bit high because we've put in a lot of R&D efforts into it. So I think it's going to start out by being about 30 to 50% more than regular chicken eggs, and that in itself is a challenge. But I do think that as we scale up, it is going to come down for sure with the high volumes that we're going to see with the adoption of eggs.
Great. And I just want to bring Sonalie back into the conversation as well to maybe share about, what are some of the technologies that you see out there that you're excited about that could help to make alternative proteins more affordable down the line?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things that's missing on the Asian landscape, I would say, is precision fermentation technology. It's probably the technology I'm most excited about this year. I think it's pretty revolutionary because it's molecularly identical to animal foods, but it's not cellular agriculture, which is very divisive for people and obviously has huge challenges ahead of it in terms of scalability and in terms of investment, and also, of course, in terms of regulation. So I would like to see more precision fermentation companies across the region, and maybe even plant-based companies looking to use fermentation technology, very similar to what Impossible did. So it has a plant-based patty, but it's heme, which gives that iron-rich mouthfeel that really makes it akin to meat. That's using precision fermentation technology. So that's one. But two, I think let's go back to basics. What's really missing today is supply chain technology. More machinery, more plant-based fat production. We have so many brands launching, but we don't have as many of those brands being able to scale today to the level that we need them to scale, right? Because it's one thing to have, the excitement of a startup and have some pilots that are really well done and well received. But eventually, if you want to have impact, you need to scale. And that requires, huge production infrastructure, which honestly, we don't have ready today. The other thing I'm excited about is there are bigger ingredient companies that are really starting to get into this market, like Ingredient and, for example, AAK that do oil and fats. And I'm excited for them to help startups like Float and like Green Rebel be able to kind of take their products to the next level using these building blocks. And especially on the ingredient side, I think we have a huge opportunity to really focus on more climate resilient crops that are native to our region. And that's going to be a huge part of building out food security, but also climate food security. Because I really am not sure that most of us are aware just how much our daily food menu is going to be really impacted by climate change. We are losing, thousands, millions of acres of arable land across the world. Weather changes mean that we can't grow the same crops everywhere like we used to. And of course, shortages in water and eventually energy. I mean, we are having an energy crisis, certainly in China, but also across the world, in Europe, and it's coming to Asia. All of these things means we need to rethink how we grow food. So I really want to see more climate resiliency, and I think it is starting. And there are companies like in Singapore, What If Foods, that are really experimenting with different crops to make plant-based milks and instant noodles. But we need to get that on scale. And we need to really start focusing on what's available locally rather than, relying on imports.
Yeah, so I think your second and third point are really interesting, right? Because they, in a way, interact with each other. Because when you're trying to scale as a startup, oftentimes you reach for, I guess, what is available. And soy, pea proteins, these are the most commonly used sort of proteins for plant-based products with more established supply chains. So to the extent that you want to make certain kind of traceability or quality standard promises to your consumer, that's kind of what you reach for. But on the other hand, you also don't want it to be a situation where everybody is becoming increasingly reliant on, a few crops, which are produced in certain parts of the world. And so how do we bring in, more diverse crops? How do we also help that contribute to greater climate resiliency? Before I go on to the other topics, I wanted to give Helga and Vin a chance to respond to any of the points that Sonalie mentioned there. Are you also thinking about maybe incorporating different types of proteins into your products? I know Green Rebel is actually a pretty eclectic mix of ingredients in your patties. Maybe you want to share with the audience what goes into your products?
Sure. Yeah, I think I second Sonalie. So at Green Rebel, creating healthy meat alternatives that are tasty is really the key in the innovation, and we'll do that by not only making clean label products which are made from natural ingredients and shorter ingredient lists, but also integrating whole foods and local crops. Actually, the some of the I think key crops that we're very excited and we're playing around now is we have been using local mushrooms to create the fibrous texture of beef, and we're now doing R&D with young jackfruit and banana hearts. So it's like banana trees are everywhere in Southeast Asia, and actually the banana heart is a part that people see as a waste, but actually you can texturize that crop and it really mimics the beef shreds. So
it's used for fish and chips as well, for vegan fish and chips.
Correct. Yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's where we're going, definitely. And we have been using a lot of local herbs as well, such as turmeric, galangal, ginger, and not only that gives the bold Asian flavors to the products, but it enhances the phytonutrient content of the products as well. So I think I really believe that in the future, going local is one of the most climate resilient strategy when it comes to product development and sourcing.
Yes, I will just second that. Actually, you're very lucky, Helga. You've got all that resource available for you here in Singapore. It's the same. Okay, we don't have any of that, so we have to literally build a factory of our own and do everything locally over here. But yeah, I agree actually with some of the points that you mentioned. I think it's important for us to be actually agnostic in terms of identifying our protein sources. So at Float Foods, we also try not to just rely on a particular kind of protein. We're looking at a whole range of proteins. And some of these proteins, when you start to isolate them, they actually bring different functional properties to the egg. Some of them are better at emulsifying, some are better at leavening or binding. So what we do is we try to play with the whole range and thousands and thousands of different plant proteins that are available to us. So we want to try to see what would work best under which conditions. I think, we can talk about challenges later, but some of the challenges with the egg, if I may just add it right now, is that for certain kinds of eggs, you can get it to scramble, but you can't get it to do other things, So we have to find the sweet spot where the egg can be versatile across all the different platforms, all the different uses and applications, and that's really the challenge I think that we have.
Yeah, and I
Great.
think I wanted to add about the price parity versus climate impact of the current animal based meat diet, right? I think it's going to be helpful for the meat alternative industry to reach price parity if some governments, and I think Singapore has a very strong potential to do this because the government is very progressive, to actually put environmental tax on animal meat. Because right now the prices are not fully capturing the negative environmental impact, right? So that's why animal-based meat is very cheap. But once
or the subsidies.
Yes, correct. Or the subsidies. In fact, in Indonesia, chicken are heavily subsidized, and that's why it's cheap. If the subsidize is taken off and probably put to veggies or the meat alternative industry, then we can reach price parity a lot faster.
I totally concur with that. I think we need to start work on this because everybody comes and tells me, Vin, the price of egg is so cheap. Are you really going to be able to compete? And it is one of the biggest challenges because eggs are cheap. I mean, people eat, eggs, the per capita consumption, as you know, in Asia is about 360, 400 eggs per person. So it's a big challenge. So I think governments need to start taxing the animal protein guys, and then so that at least it'll give us a little bit of a leg up. I think that will help.
Yeah.
Great. And I think there were, some great points that Vin was mentioning about how different, proteins, they have different functions. And I think when you look at it whole on a composite, potentially you can also do more to these plant-based alternatives to make them potentially even more nutritious or differently nutritious from the conventional products that they're replacing. So, just a little anecdote to share, at Pinduoduo, looking across our user base in China, we certainly also see this rising interest and demand for healthy and nutritious foods. And on the alternative protein space, one thing that we are trying to better understand as well is the impact of consuming plant-based proteins on human health, right? Because this is such a new and emerging space. And as Sonalie mentioned earlier on, one of the key concerns for consumers in the region is around food safety, is around the health aspects as well. So we launched a research project with A-Star to do some clinical trials to see, what happens to, human subjects when you substitute out the conventional meat that they're consuming with plant-based meats. So hopefully we'll have some results to share next year, and this can really be a basis for further discussion in the industry to launch even better sort of 2.0 types of products. So looking across, I guess, this theme of, more nutritious foods and food tech, I want to maybe ask Sonalie if you're seeing any interesting developments on this front, on this whole idea of, food as medicine or functional foods.
Yeah. So I do want to caveat what you just said and what I'm about to say, because I actually have a little bit of a bee in my bonnet, so to speak, a vegan bee, obviously, about this idea that plant-based meats equals processed equals not healthy, and somehow animal meats equals healthy. Okay. I actually am working on a project to show people what's really in their animal meat. And I'm going to be very blunt, and I'm going to tell you that most animal meat contains from the following: fecal matter, pharmaceuticals, microplastics, antibiotics, hormones, and many, many other things. So this idea that animal meat equals healthy just because you have this image that your cow is happy in a field is rubbish. Okay. And then the other argument that comes back to that is, oh, well, I only buy humane meat, etc. Less than something ridiculous, like less than 5% of all animal produced meat is raised ethically, antibiotic free, hormone free. So that is also a nonsense. And this applies to eggs and it applies to dairy, everything I'm saying. So let's just level set that most people are eating animal foods that are highly contaminated. And if we lived in a fair and just world and a transparent world, and this is a huge issue in Asia where we really do not have strong truth in advertising laws, then I don't think as many people would choose the animal meat. Price be damned. Number two, this idea that plant-based meats are somehow not as healthy. Okay, let's take a step back. Most people who are buying plant-based meats think they're buying it for protein. Most of us that are in that category of consumer are eating double the amount of protein that we need. Okay, we are over-proteined. However, we are highly under-fibered, and plant-based meats and products are packed with fiber. So for me, what's the problem here? It's a communication issue. We have not communicated on the right things about these products, and we need to usher in the fiber revolution. In Asia, we have huge rising rates of stomach and colon cancer because we don't eat as much fiber as our grandparents. This needs to be tempered. We need to start getting fiber back in our diets. And here you have plant-based meat that is hitting both the protein box, ticking the protein box and the fiber box. Now, to answer your question more specifically, there are different types of consumers, and there will always be consumers who are looking for the most clean, I don't like that word, but let's use it because that's what people understand, the cleanest label, the shortest label, the healthiest label, and there will always be a market for products for those people. But again, most plant-based meats exist to replace industrial agriculture-derived animal meats that are not healthy for you. And there are already studies in the US and in Europe, small ones, but beginning, that show that plant-based meats compared to animal meats in consumption has resulted in healthier subjects. So we already have the beginnings that show that actually it's better. Another study just came out, plant-based fats are better for your heart, better for your prostate. I mean, in Green Queen, we have a whole section of all the studies. You can go and see every month, every week, there's a new study that's showing what some of us in the industry already know and suspect, which is that it's just better to eat plants, even if they have been somewhat processed. So I do want to stick with that. And I want to say that, however, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur and you want to do something a little different, yes, there will always be a need for these, short label, very, very, minimal ingredient products. And there are some brands that are already coming out with kind of version 2, as you say, of their products. One good example is Ura in the chicken company in Europe. They only have 5 or 6 ingredients on their label, one of them being olive oil. So, I mean, it's not like there aren't these options already. There's another one called Abbott Butcher in the US. They're very, very well known in that market, and they have very short ingredient labels, and they're very specific about what they put in their products. So it's not I don't want to start painting plant-based meats with this like unhealthy label when I really just don't think that's true.
Totally agree with that. Yes. Here, Sonalie.
Yeah, there were 2 researchers actually. One has said that eating plant-based meat alternative, even though it's not the most clean label meat, it actually reduces the risk of cardiovascular. And the other one saying that your gut health is actually improved by lots because of the fiber content in the meat alternatives. And those 2 brands are not most famous for their cleanest label. Yeah. So yeah, definitely second Sonalie.
But you're right also that the whole story around the fiber has been very, very largely overlooked. Everybody is so focused on the protein and the fats that they're not looking at the fiber. And there are a lot of, as you know, in Asia, the gut issues, right, with our guts, and issues surrounding colon cancers, all that on the rise. So I think you're right in that we need to look at beyond the protein. We're all hung up on the protein. I'm guilty of that as well. So we try to reduce the sat fats in our eggs and increase the protein. But I think, we need more resources to look at all the other urgent issues that is affecting our health in Asia. That's important. Salt, intake also very, very high, right, over here in Asia as well. So that would be a good thing to do going forward.
Yeah, I think especially in the wake of COVID, a lot of people are re-examining what they're consuming and how they're consuming it as well, right? And in fact, on the point about fiber, looking at the ingredient label probably doesn't really give you that clear an idea of what the benefits are, right? I think from young you've heard you need more fiber in your diet, but what does that actually do for you, right? So it's not something that people necessarily internalize, and so I think our hope is that also as more of such research gets done, and we're also not entirely sure what the findings will be, right? But it's more as more work is being done on different groups of consumers, more of that can be communicated and shared with the consumers as well, so that in the end they're making healthy and informed choices. So we are running a little bit short on time, and I would basically close off by going back to I guess each of you, since you are all women founders in your own right. So I'll just mention briefly also that Sonalie has started a sustainable packaging marketplace on top of Green Queen, so she's doing double duty. So what do each of you, as women founders in the food tech or sustainable tech space, think that women bring as a unique perspective, and what are some of the words of advice that you might have for others who are keen to enter the space? So maybe starting off with Vin.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I'm so proud that we have this platform, because I think there's not enough to shout out about the fact that us women entrepreneurs, we have a different perspective, because I think we are the primary, sorry guys, but we are the primary caretaker of children, of food, of family, of the house. And I think that in itself brings a very, very different perspective to nutrition and food and health and wellness. So I think that is something that we look at from a very holistic and a more compassionate kind of perspective, if I may. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but hey, it's out there.
Oh,
But that's what I really believe. And I think for those who really want to come in and jump on this bandwagon of really raising the profile of women founders and women entrepreneurs, there are lots of gaps out there. As far as I can see, there are gaps. Sonali mentioned this whole manufacturing to scale gap that we are seeing. We ourselves are seeing when we go to OEMs, we cannot get the right quality, cannot get the right scale, cannot get the right mix. If they have one element, they don't have the other. It's really difficult to get the whole value chain in one OEM. So, I think the gaps out there would be plug and play manufacturing for small to large scale, blockchain in terms of maybe traceability, digital traceability of where our sources of ingredients are coming from. Right now it's so opaque, we have no idea where what we eat comes from. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on that front as well. And I guess apart from that, really just be tenacious, be committed, and yeah, that's my advice.
Helga.
Yeah, I think in Asia, most of the consumers of meat alternatives are women. So we know the ins and outs of the needs and wants of our main primary consumer. And so that's, I think, is a competitive edge for women leaders and founders. As an advice, I think women have the intelligence, have the capabilities to start something and scale, but a lot of women are lacking confidence. So I think that's the area where we need to learn. I've read this and I found that this to be true, that male founders are very confident about their dreams and females are more confident about their traction after they've completed something. And so I think finding mentors of both female and male, where you can learn how to be confident about your dreams, but also stay rooted with what you can accomplish, is a really good start when you want to embark on a new endeavor.
Great advice. Sonali?
Yeah, I think one of the things that women bring to the table is we're bridge makers. That's our role in so much of our life, whether it's our family or our friends. And that allows us to have the ability to take in multiple perspectives. And that's really important when you're running a company and when you're developing a product. Let's not forget that over 70% of household budgets worldwide, depending on the country, it can be more, are spent by women. So we need women making products for women, not men making products for women. So that's always been upside down. And, in terms of advice, I do want to jump on what both Helga and Vin said. I definitely feel like I didn't ask for help enough because I thought that was a sign of weakness. I also didn't take a lot of my successes seriously. I'm not very good at celebrating them because I just think I need to get to the next place. Exactly what Helga said. I said, I need more traction so that people will respect me. And honestly, I regret it now. As I get older, I realize actually I've done a lot of things and I wish I had been more confident to share them. So yes, celebrate your wins and also ask for help more, because I'm always amazed that my male co-founder, who is amazing and I love him in my packaging business, but he just asks for help and without even thinking about it. And he asks for favors. And I never ask for favors. I always feel bad, which I think is also an Asian thing and an Indian thing, where I'm like, I don't want to put anyone out. I don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to be a drain. And I always feel like I have to give something back. And he takes when he needs. And sometimes he gives back and sometimes he doesn't. He's a lovely person. And he does help people, but he doesn't see it so much as he has to like come up front and sell what he can give in order to get something. And I've really, it's been fascinating as we built this business and we're on the phone and how we approach things differently. Like with investors, I mean, he just arrives feeling like he knows he should be there. And I had to learn that and not have to like overprove myself.
Well, I think that's something that a lot of us on the panel, as well as those listening, can probably relate to. And I hope all of you take away these, words of wisdom, right? Have confidence in yourselves, and be clear about the vision that you have, right? And work hard towards working to achieving it. And with that, I know we've gone over time a little bit. And so thank you, everybody, for your kind attention. And thank you to everyone on the panel and for She
Thank
Loves Tech
you.
for having us.
Thank
All right.
you.
Have a wonderful lunch and a wonderful weekend. Over to Jonathan.